On the agenda tonight, we're going back to take a look at the Easybeats with their performance of Friday on My Mind. Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus and welcome to another analysis video. If you enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. So it seems like, unfortunately, a lot of performances by bands and artists back in the 60s are being blocked on copyright now on YouTube, so you can't see those performances. This is going to be an analysis that I'm going to be doing a bit tonight, going through the pre-chorus, the chorus, some chords, but I'll also take some of the footage from the previous analysis video I did on the Easybeats about a year ago. So I will be referring to a performance that I believe is still active on YouTube. If you click on the link in the description below, you'll be able to watch that performance video, fingers crossed, and then you'll be able to come back here for the analysis. So go and watch that video, get into that performance, and then come back here, and I'll see you guys in the comment section. And there we have it. The first thing to mention about this video, not only Stevie's frontman ability and the way that he just gets everybody's attention and keeps you so engaged throughout the performance. That's Stevie Wright, by the way, the guy that was singing, and the link to this video, as always, is going to be in the description below, so you guys can watch it there as well if you want to. But once you've got somebody who has that charisma at the front of the stage and is so likable instantly, the way that he delivers the vocals, smiling, and the dancing, the energy as well, what you'll find sometimes he is struggling for breath because of the amount of effort that he puts into the performance. So not only have we got that energy coming from the frontman of the band, but also within the composition, because I think the tempo is being pushed slightly here with this performance when compared with the tempo on that original record. Also, it seems like the crowd are doing the wrong kind of dancing for this high energy track, but moving past that, the thing about this song and the way it is played on the guitar is that it will fly under the radar unless you play guitar yourself as to all of the techniques that are being used. And it's George Young, by the way, who plays rhythm here, and he is the older brother of Malcolm Young, was the older brother of Malcolm and Angus. Also, listening to Stevie's accent when he's introducing the song and talking about the attractive birds in the audience, and birds being women, it's something that used to be used, probably not so much nowadays, but you can hear that his accent sounds very English. But these guys were and are known historically as an Australian band because they all ended up in Australia from a very young age. Their families all moved there independently, and then they met each other in Australia and started a band there and were very successful in Australia before then going over to the USA and the UK and having massive success there as well. So just a word about this as a composition and the way that the mood fits the lyrical content, and the feeling of the verses is very much down compared to that of the chorus, because in the song Friday on My Mind, you're waiting for Friday, and the chorus is where Friday comes along. So that's where everything really does take a bit of a step up and gets lifted, because that is the happy, the excited part of the song. And then we go back into that second verse and things just drop down again. So it's very cleverly done. And also the fact that when we do get into that second verse, we're now actually coming in on the offbeat. It might be 4 and where the drum fill starts, and they're just waiting for that cue in order to get back into that verse. The other thing to mention about the song as a whole is how progressive it is, because it's not just 3 chords that are getting looped around, and we will go through just the technical aspects of the guitar. I'm not going to go through all of the chords, it's not going to be an instructional video, but the technical points about this opening riff are so important, because unless you play it correctly, it's not going to sound exactly how George gets it to sound. So when we've got this intro riff and jumping between the A string and the D string, the most important thing here, then I did apply a little bit of palm muting in order to get the sound a little bit clearer so that hopefully you guys can hear each note individually, because that is the key. I'm not sure whether George is going to be applying palm muting to it because he's probably got a bit of a cleaner tone. So having this concise sound to the riff is so difficult to do because you have to pick and not catch the other string. If you catch the other string, it starts to sound like this. And you start getting that chord sound to it. Whereas you want to have, in slow motion, 2 definite picks with the palm muting to make it a little bit clearer. So you can hear how I'm not going and strumming both of those strings at once. So you've probably got a bit more of an appreciation of how technical this riff is. Even though it might sound easy, it's one of those that you're definitely not going to be playing this song and this riff in particular after just picking up the guitar and playing for a few weeks. It takes a hell of a lot of practice on the right hand to get the control and the flow with the accuracy. And you've got to alternate the pick here. So with that alternate picking, down, up, down, up, down, up, if you're just doing downstrokes, you're never going to get the same sound. It's got to be alternating to get the accuracy and the speed paired together. And then as we move on, we then have some string skipping involved, which is on the G when we move down, and we're now skipping over the A string. So it means that the pick is covering even more distance, but still has to be as accurate. And this kind of thing happens all the way through the verse, and we have a little run down to B, still string skipping. And I think here we have a little chromatic run down, and then we get into the E minor, which will just be the same thing. And then we move up to the A. And this is all string skipping. There's a lot of technique in here. We then go back to the D. So I just want to show you guys the chords and how to achieve those fast chord changes before we get into the chorus. We're starting with the C down to an E, and it is a little bit involved with the right hand because we have like that, a little bit of double time strumming going on into the A. And the key to playing these chord changes quickly and efficiently is to simplify the shapes. So with my A, you can see I'm barring with that first finger, and then I'm pretty much going to be playing a G flat, and this is going to be the G flat 5, so just a power chord really. And then we go over to the B, and again a B5 will suffice here, down to an E5 over to the A. And you can see the way that I was playing, starting from the A, G flat 5, B5, E5, back to the A. And really simple here, because when you're going, you want to be able to jump between the chords without having to move your hands around to get the full chord shapes. That's why there's a lot of power chords in here, a lot of fifths rather than full chord shapes. And by the way, a fifth is going to be your second string down if you don't play the guitar. If I was playing a full G flat chord, it'll go across like that. When you're playing a fifth, you're just hearing the first 2 strings of that particular chord. You can go as far as the octave if you want to, but you don't get as far as the major or the minor, depending on the chord that you're playing. So that is a fifth. It's a really simplified version of a chord, and when you add lots of distortion, you'll find a lot of rock bands will be playing those power chords or those fifth chords all over the guitar, because they're very easy to move around and the distortion fills out the sound. This also explains why when we start the chorus, we're in our barred A position down here, because those previous chords have been played so quickly we haven't had time to go anywhere else. So once we've got this, we're now in that bar position, then we go to our D flat minor, And now we're playing the A on the 5th fret, full bar chord position here. And again, D flat minor here, into a D, into the G flat, B minor, into a D, now into the B major, into a D again, A, then an E7th, and then we're going into the A minor, D, G, and then we just have a stop on the E. So those final few chords, the A minor, you can see the way that it's a lot more deliberate across those strings. And then just, again, on that low E, it's not playing a full chord, just hit that low E, the 5th, maybe the octave, but bring in that palm mute straight away. So at that point, we're then back into the riff that I demonstrated earlier. And another thing just to point out about this chorus is the fact that it is more progressive than you're expecting. The fact that we start with the A, D flat minor, A, D flat minor. And you can be forgiven for thinking that we're just going to continue those two chords around for the chorus, because a lot of mainstream pop hits maybe have 2 or 3 chords in a chorus and it's just looped around and then you get back into the verse. But this is where we then have the change from that D flat minor into the D major, and then the G flat major into the B minor, back into the D, and now to the B major rather than the minor that we just had. So we are progressive here into the D, into the A, now into an E7th, and right at the end of the chorus is where we got A minor, D, G, and then stopping on the E5. So there's a lot of chords in there, and this is the great thing, that it just pulls you into the chorus thinking that you're just going along and you know where the chord progression is going to go, but then they just totally take you on a different journey, and then you come all the way back to where you started in the verse. But it is such an interesting composition, and as with a lot of the songs in the 60s, most of them, it is a short composition, but there's so much crammed into that 2.5 or 3 minutes. But it is the way that it's been put together musically to get that feel of being uplifted in the chorus. And then by the end of that chorus, we're going down because of that A minor, the D, the G, and the E, and back into our riff. It's taking us back down to almost where you don't want to be in those verses. You always want to be in that chorus. The other thing that we have in this performance, of course, are those harmonies in the background and being able to fill in that vocal sound when the lead singer isn't singing. It's one of those things that every 60s band had, and 70s bands as well. It was a given that you had to be able to sing if you played an instrument, and having 2 or 3 vocalists really gave such a full sound live so that they could replicate the records. We do have Dick Diamond on bass here as well, but he doesn't get any airtime, unfortunately, at least not that I saw, and we do have Gordon Snowy Fleet on drums as well, keeping that rhythm section really tight. The drums and bass have to be on it in order to get a good live performance, and it definitely is here. I do want to get into a little bit of the background behind the band and cover a little bit of the history, because they're one of those bands that really did burn brightly when they were around. I mentioned earlier about them all ending up in Australia, even though they came from the UK and Netherlands as well, basically Europe, and then they got together in 1964 and started playing in the basement of a pub in Sydney, and they started to become popular. It was obviously inspired by the bands of the British Invasion, pretty much all of which you can find on this channel. But the important thing to mention about the Easybeats is that they were an original band. They wrote their own songs, and there were a lot of bands at the time who were just playing covers, and that was it. So Mike Vaughan started to notice this band, got involved with them and signed them, so he was now their manager, and through him they also managed to sign to an independent label. They also signed to Albert Productions, which was a publishing company at the time, and through that got a link to Parlophone Records and signed a deal with them. So, in 1965 is where everything happened, because their first single that they released was called For My Woman, and that got to number 33 in the charts, and then the next single, She's So Fine, was a massive hit. It got to number 3 in the charts, and that made them nationally known all across Australia. That same year, they released Wedding Ring, and that got to number 7 in the charts, massively successful, with their first album released that year as well, 1965, and that was just called Easy. They were writing their own songs as well. That was an album of originals where all of the band members really did pitch in. And in 1966 is when they released their second album, and that was called It's Too Easy. They were touring Australia as well, massively popular and successful in Australia. And this is when Mike Vaughan, their manager, flew over to the USA while the guys were still in Australia to see if he could drum up any interest over in the USA from the record labels there, and he did. So they signed to United Artists over in the USA. They released their EP called Easy Fever, and then Volume 3, the third album, came along. And that was the last album that they recorded in Australia, because in 1966 they relocated to London, and they also teamed up with Shel Talmy, and he was the producer for The Who and The Kinks. So he knew how to get that sound of those British Invasion bands, which is what the Easybeats were after. They recorded Come and See Her, and unfortunately when that was released, it didn't do particularly well. So they intentionally went for a more sophisticated sound. That's what the record label wanted, and the band, I think, as well. And this is the song that they came up with, Friday on My Mind. And you can tell that this song is so different to other songs that were around at the time because of the progressive nature that we've just been through. So they released this in 1966. It was a massive hit, got to number 6 in the UK and also number 16 in the USA. In 1967, they released Who'll Be the One, and unfortunately that didn't do as well. At this time, they were touring with the Rolling Stones, and in 1967, they released Good Friday, and that was the album that in the USA was called Friday on My Mind. Also, Snowy Fleet, the drummer, unfortunately quit at this time because of the schedule and being on tour and being away from his wife and kids. So Freddie Smith came in to do a little bit for the band, and they recorded Heaven and Hell, and that didn't do well either, unfortunately. It probably didn't help that the BBC here in the UK banned that song from being played, and in the USA they released a censored version of it where they had to change a few lyrics, and from my understanding it wasn't that bad, but things back in the 60s were very different, and even mentioning hell was probably something that was borderline. But anyway, moving forward, Tony Cahill then joined the band as the drummer, and at this time they also toured with Gene Pitney. They released Falling Off the Edge of the World, and unfortunately that wasn't successful either. And in 1968 they released Hello, How Are You?, which did get to number 20 in the UK charts, but it was a much more pop and mainstream sound, and the band, after releasing that, said that it might have been a mistake because a lot of their hardcore fans were then alienated because of that sudden change in sound. In 1968 was the year that they released their album Vigil. Getting into the late 60s now is when the band started to drift apart. Harry and George, as the songwriting duo, started to find that they could get the sound that they wanted in the studio production-wise, but also started playing other instruments, so they felt like they could almost get everything down just by themselves. In 1969, they did sign with Polydor Records, and they released St. Louis. Unfortunately, Unfortunately, that didn't do very well here in the UK, but it was a hit in Australia where it got to number 21 in the charts. Their final album, Friends, was released after they'd already separated, and interestingly, the final Australian tour that they did was very much just to try and pay back the debt that they owed to the record label. And this is the way that it works. If you sign a recording contract with a label, they spend a lot of money on production and touring and marketing, and if you're not successful, you owe them that money. So the guys had to tour, even though they probably didn't feel like doing that at that time because they knew that they were going to go their separate ways. Also, to mention that Harry and George were writing songs for another 3 years in the UK to try and pay back that debt to the record label. So it's something that I think people don't understand how recording contracts work. Once the guys went their separate ways, they explored different avenues independently, but it's great to have a look back at these guys in full flow with one of their monster hits, but also to touch on the technicalities of actually playing this song, because there's a hell of a lot in there. But thank you guys for watching this video. I thought it was important to get the Easybeats up on the channel in some shape or form, considering that we can't watch the original performances together anymore. But also on that previous analysis video, there was a bit of history in there as well, which I would like to have on the channel. So thank you guys for watching. If you did enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Rock!